Our next speaker is someone that I've enjoyed. Well, I'm not going to talk too much about her. I'm just going to read her bio. But I have watched this woman just blossom as an artist. There's an event down at downtown called Chalk It Up, I believe is the title of it. And her chalked, actually she did this one right here, was amazing. And it so inspired me that we had to have her come in and talk. Her name is Amanda Baker, and she's graduated from UCLA with a bachelor's degree in political science and international relationships, and learned that an authentic life would be better served in non-political arenas. Yeah, she moved from Sacramento to Guatemala to serve in the Peace Corps, and then moved home and left again for New York to find herself. She's now back in Sacramento, working at Bread of Life, a nonprofit whose focus is connective communication and compassion. Amanda looks forward to further integrating her experiences to exercise creativity and build authentic connections in the world of expanding and infinite possibilities. Therefore, her SAC Soul Talk is called Infinite Possibilities. Please welcome to SAC Soul Talks, Amanda Baker.
Hello. I will talk about my art, but I wanted to share a little bit about how I got to the point where I wanted to draw that. So I'll start by saying I'm emotional. And I lived a life of hearing that I was too sensitive or too much. And it was only recently that I learned that the degree to which I feel my emotions is actually a little bit more potent than what other people experience. So it helped me to take a little bit more ownership over what I feel, rather than feeling like I've got to constantly apologize for myself and what experience I'm putting others through because of it. So, because I feel things deeply, I have pretty vivid memories that I can trace back all the way to preschool, like crying during nap time because I didn't get an award for falling asleep, and then getting the award because she thought I was sleeping because my hair was matted in my face, and then falling asleep. But you know, I remember her shoes and everything. And one of my first memories that I could really connect the empathic part of myself with was in the 5th grade. I had these girlfriends who you could say they were popular. I wouldn't say I was kind of just tagging along because I wanted to feel powerful, I guess. And we were taking one of those teen magazine quizzes called Are You Popular? And the two of them were popular according to this quiz outcome, and I got crowd pleaser. And the two of them were like, oh, you're a crowd pleaser. And I was like, well, you know, I don't really understand what's wrong about that because I care so much more about nurturing and including other people, and I would rather that than elevate myself or be perceived as something apart from what everyone is experiencing. So the magazine's description was that, you know, I would do pretty much anything to make people around me feel comfortable, which is very true. I get very uncomfortable with distress, and one of my main life lessons is learning how to not feel like I need to control that for other people or for myself. So wanting to be able to understand others to the degree that I would need to stop feeling like I had to fix something for them, I embarked on a lot of different journeys to push my limits and discover where I was putting a cap on what I could do. And I went to the Peace Corps because I really felt driven to provide a service and learn how another group of people live so that I could help them figure out how to do it better, I guess. And the experience itself was pretty exciting. A lot of ups and downs. I mentioned I feel things very deeply. So it was a roller coaster. And when people ask me how that roller coaster went, I say, well, anything that you feel it times 1,000 there. So at the bottom of the spectrum, you're at the lowest low, and at the top, you're at your highest high. And all of that was of value to me. And then, of course, later I learned maybe everybody doesn't experience it to that degree, but I'm glad that I did, because I had so much depth to the whole outcome of it. I went all the way to the bottom, like screaming at construction workers in front of my house for blocking my doorway with 50-pound bags of concrete and saying, "You get this out of my doorway right now." And they would say, "Oh, just calm down, mamita." And then I, of course, did the opposite of that and screamed a little bit more and cussed at them in English, and they understood that. So they were like, "Oh gosh, this girl's not kidding." And they finally moved the concrete, but it ended in some turmoil that, I was known as, in Spanish, la gringa enojada. I was the angry white girl that would walk around with my head down and not let people invade my personal space or me or, catcall me or whatever it was. I would pretend like I was not a friendly person to protect myself. But, it was also a valuable experience because although that may not have been the best approach to achieve some common ground, I did learn a little bit about personal power there and pushing my way into an ownership situation. So one of the other great things about it was that I gained a lot of really close friends that were also serving in the Peace Corps at the same time, and they came to know me as the giver of heart-to-hearts because I would just spew compliments at people like, well, we might have been drinking, but I would always be very, very giving of validation to others. And it almost became oh boy, here she goes with another heart-to-heart kind of thing. But it was really fun because I connected with a lot of people that way. And one of my favorite memories there and one of my highest highs was sharing Thanksgiving with the Guatemalan family that I became very close with. And I gave a heart-to-heart there, and another thing they teased me about was, of course she cried, and I did. I cried when I gave this speech to everyone because I just felt so grateful that, they would join us in this weird American holiday where they actually have to spend time being grateful. They don't just do it every day. So, we had to tell them why it was extra special and not just a day of thanks, but of gathering and being together. And I got to thank them profusely for bringing us there in their home and hosting us and letting us share such a beautiful experience with them. And it was the best Thanksgiving I've ever had. And I think what I gained the most is just I went there to try and help them figure out how to live a better life, and they really humbled me and showed me that, I might also have some limits without saying so much, but I got to figure out how do I open my eyes a little bit wider and see what I'm not yet perceiving without having to perceive it first. So at the end of that, I was very blessed. I left with a whole other family. One of them is getting married today, and I had really wanted to go down there for that. Couldn't be there, but happy to be here instead. And the connections were so deep because the feelings are so deeply ingrained in me that it becomes an imprint. It's like an indelible imprint that my relationship with them could actually be like a real family relationship. And I still talk to them to this day, and they still tease me relentlessly. So it works out for me. But with all that, I got really lonely and, of course, was very happy to come home and be comfortable and around familiar things. And I craved the normal life. And so I got the same job that I left when I went to Peace Corps, which wasn't really a career move for me. It was more of a let's fit in and get in the mainstream of things. And I enjoyed myself, and I spent a lot of time really being there for other people, which was something that I really cared a lot about. But in the process, I stopped seeking out what really mattered to me, and I kind of shut down a little bit and went into a lot of debt and felt kind of stuck because, well, weddings are expensive, so. And when you make no money for 2 years and then participate in weddings, you lose a lot of money. So it was wonderful though. But I felt like I couldn't do much, and I ended up shutting down so much of what my heart needed that I got into a really unhealthy relationship and just almost fell apart at the seams, and ran into my friend's mother, who runs a life training course, and she told me it was going into session the very next week, so I jumped in and learned that my craving normalcy was more about just a fear of being vulnerable. And I needed to shut that side down so that I could fit in and resonate with everybody, because that's where I was most comfortable. I wanted to be in a place where everyone else was most comfortable. And I lost a little bit of who I am and what I care about. And it, being in the Peace Corps kind of forces you into vulnerability because you don't have your own ground. You don't know anything about where you are, and you're totally isolated from everything that's familiar to you. But you don't really have a choice. You have to kind of open up and learn. And when you're here, it's so easy to not do that because you're not needing to push past your comfort zones to get by in life. And you end up building a box again around yourself and needing to break out of it every now and again. So when I went through this training course, I learned a little bit more accountability for how I feel and what I'm doing to create that for myself. And what would I do if I didn't have to be stuck because of debt? So I moved to New York, and I decided that it was going to be the best place for me because I didn't really know hardly anybody there. I had nobody to tell me what my limitations were or what their expectations were of me. And I got to see what I wanted to do and be anonymous and just free to the point where I learned that I was the one putting the limits on myself that I couldn't see because I attributed that to everybody else around me. And I just loved walking through Manhattan by myself and watching the sunset on 42nd Avenue and seeing the magic of the place that's kind of the center of our world. And I had a lot of exciting experiences there that helped me to see the magic again that I was so excited about, like learning how and why everything works. I took a biology class and had a bird biologist for a professor, and he worked at the American Museum of Natural History. So in talking to him during office hours, we got to go to the lab underneath the American Museum of Natural History. And he excited me so much because he was one of those people who would be like, oh my gosh, imagine the miracle. These birds' genes are so slightly variated that there's no way to really explain that. And it's not something you can write down and say, oh, that's why it makes sense. There's just a rainbow of different colors in these blackbirds, and that's exciting because you can't explain it. And so are fractals and all this magical stuff that goes deeper into what the universe is really all about. And I did some exercises for manifestation, and I read a book called E Squared, and part of the exercises were to come up with something you don't think would be around very much. And I came up with purple coats because New York, everyone's wearing like really long coats, and they're usually black or navy or red. And so I walked around the first day, and I was looking for them, and I didn't see any, and then I got on the subway car to go home, and there was a person wearing a violet coat at the end of the car, and I was like, okay, that's good. That's really exciting. And then I was just kind of enjoying that moment, and somebody like plopped down next to me, and her coat fell on my lap, and it was purple. And after that, I remember seeing a man walking down the street like head to toe in purple. His shoes, his hat, everything in between was purple. And seeing people in purple coats on every single corner of the intersection, and then I just saw them all the time, everywhere. And the lesson isn't necessarily that I drew all that to me, but I opened my eyes to what was already there, and that also attracted more of it. So that was a really magical miracle for me in that place, and I was happy to be there. I worked in a couple of systems like Pfizer Pharmaceuticals that I didn't love so much because I was all about nutritional wellness and holistic well-being, but I learned a lot about how that side of the world works, and I think that's important because there are necessities, and it's also great to know how to work around that if it's not something you choose to follow. I worked in big finance, and I loved seeing all that money. It was pretty great. And also helpful to see how that contributes to the way the world functions, and how I may kind of rebuke that system because I don't really like the idea of being complacent with something that doesn't allow for the free flow of emotions. Just because when I stuff that down, I get really uncomfortable. But it was great to learn the system and also contribute what I had to give and hear the feedback from that I was able to create more space for people in the environments that I put myself in, whether they were my favorite place to be or not. So I ended up having to move out of my apartment because they changed the leasing system, and at that point, it was 2 years, and I was enjoying being alone, but also really lonely. So I wanted to move closer to my family. And I came back to the Bay Area and really wanted to get a job in nutritional counseling, and it just didn't work out. Their HR person quit, and they couldn't hire anybody, and I needed a job. So I got another system job at a PR firm, which focuses mainly on surface level fixing from my experience there. And the infrastructure was such that I didn't really feel like there was as much investment in personal growth with yourself or with the company. So I worked hard with my team of people to build some respect around being a sensitive and emotional person, because there's a lot to contribute in professional and mechanical environments when you have that to offer. And then, realized I needed to come to a place where I could just dive into work that actually fed my philanthropic and loving side. So I came to work at Bread of Life, and the focus is compassionate conversations and authentic connection. And I love it, and I work there part-time, which allows me the opportunity to explore my own creativity, like doing Chalk It Up, and coming up with an image that to me represents infinite possibility. And the magic in that, thank you, RJ, was that I got to be in a place where everyone was contributing this expression of their right brain creativity. And even the people who were just onlookers were just so engaged, and everyone was involved in sharing something that they created or that they loved that somebody else could create and share. And there was one onlooker who stopped and said, "Oh my God, that contrast is just outrageous." And then he stopped again and he said, "Wow, that purple is such an emotional color." And the miracle for me was that he is a really deep feeling person too, and he showed that to me. And I got to feel resonance with this thing that I actually was energized to do and validated in doing. And I really just hope to do so much more of that. So, thank you.
Well, thank you.